Hi, welcome everybody tonight for an exciting AMA. We have the Crypto Lobbyist, aka the Hoj Lobbyist, aka Joshua, also known by Josh, who has, for you don't know out there, that has been leading the way for us on Capitol Hill. We have, retained his company to go out and fight the good fight that needs to happen in DeFi over the infrastructure bill. So this past week, Josh, his team has been in Washington, D.C., as you've seen from the post. So tonight, I wanted to give a platform and open it up for Josh to, tell us everything that's happening. Also learn a little more about himself and where DeFi stands as is today, and where do we think that it is going, and what can we do to make that happen. So Josh, with that kind of being said, welcome to the call. It's a pleasure to have you on. You've done an amazing job thus far for us, and I just want to go out and express my gratitude for you off the bat here. You've done wonderful. You made waves in Washington D.C. So before we get into that, I think for our community and maybe for anybody new out there to the Angels and maybe DeFi in general, learning a little more about yourself. What does your practice do? What does it aim to do? And a little bit about your background before we dive into the DC events would be very helpful. So if you don't mind, is it okay to share a little bit about, what you've done in the past and how that came to fruition in today's world?
Sure, absolutely. First off, I'd like to thank all of you for giving me this opportunity, not just to speak with you this evening, but also, just to conduct the work that we've been doing, because this is a really important topic, and it's something that's going to be very commonplace coming up in the next few years. For those that don't know me, my name is Joshua Deese. I'm the principal lobbyist and founder at JP Deese and Associates. We're a boutique full-service lobbying firm. We work with lots of civil rights work, which is how I started out in lobbying, doing some education reform, women's rights bills, worked on the Safe School Improvement Act, which worked to stop bullying in schools, not just K through 12, but also in colleges and universities. I'm a Florida native. Grew up in the Miami area and went to the University of Maryland in College Park for a few years after I graduated high school. Lived there for 5 years, and during my time there, it's a 15-minute drive from the DC area, so I was very politically active. I became politically active when I was 15, doing some local grassroots work in my community. But in DC, I've done work with the Trevor Project, which works to prevent youth suicide and bullying. Also work with the Human Rights Campaign, doing lobbying work. So we would meet with members of Congress to discuss various pieces of legislation that were of interest to us. And not only that, I spoke on some panels and gave congressional testimony as well. Right now, I'm finishing up my public policy degree at the University of California, Riverside. I focus on international relations and economic policy. So particularly with my economic policy background, there's a lot of overlap with centralized finance and decentralized finance and cryptocurrency. So, that's always been of interest to me myself. And I also have some entrepreneurial experience. Back in 2015, some college friends and we started a music app called Beatster. And we did that for about 5 years, and that was a lot of fun. So I got to learn more about the business world and investments and venture capital and things like that. So that was a lot of fun.
So tying that in and seeing the venture and then also being a lobbyist, people tell me all the time, Taylor, in cannabis, because that's the industry that I've came out of, was lobbying was key. And so I certainly had those conversations. So I definitely respect what you do, as I could never do it. And it's beautiful to see. So that's really cool. And back to the anti-bullying, we actually get behind a lot of social equity projects here at the Angels, different charities, besides advocacy and investing, we like to really, no pun intended, but expand our wings and really touch communities and places. So anything down that realm, that you're working on, feel free in the future to share it with us, as we'd be interested in, teaming up and supporting where we can and where we have bandwidth at. Also, as we're big supporters of anything that's, for the better. Yeah, so great intro. Let's dive into the juicy part. I think, everybody wants to know then the $1 million question: what's going to happen with DeFi? What's up with crypto? I get messaged every day from Telegram to Facebook and every other social platform, all the way down to my phone and beeper, if you can believe it. Just kidding. But it's a big issue. It's something that we want to take seriously. That's the reason why we've retained your group, and we've sent you guys out alongside with Hoj to really be at the forefront of fighting for the prohibition of DeFi is what I'll call it, and crypto as a general. So, with that being said, first and foremost, how overall do you think that your experience went with the mission that we had in mind in DC this past week?
I believe that our lobbying efforts this past week in Washington were largely successful. We really hit the ground running. It's not every day that an SEC commissioner welcomes you to have a meeting with them. So, that's really great progress there. When we're talking about cryptocurrency and DeFi, particularly with the main issue that we're looking at right now is the Invest in America Act, which is, the infrastructure bill. The legislation, the language that's within this bill, it's essentially a big bank protection amendment. That's what it is. It's to protect big banks and centralized finance. So because cryptocurrency is in its infancy, and we are essentially in a pioneering era, we are the early adopters of this space. This allows us, this is a fresh breeding ground right now to take these opportunities and to insert ourselves into these conversations, because the United States government is going to, or they already are, attempting to regulate this space, whether it be taxation or regulations on who's allowed to participate and who isn't. So when you have these new and emerging technologies or a new policy space, it's those who get to that finish line first. Those are the ones who get to write the laws and write the language. So what we want to do as a community is ensure that DeFi, number one, has a seat at the table, but also number two, that we're being heard. Because centralized finance, like, say Robinhood and Coinbase, they have, they're paying lobbyists in Washington and New York City $50,000+ a month. They're paying these hotshot lawyers. They've got all of this capital, right? They operate these big machines, and that can be daunting and a bit intimidating for people in the DeFi space. But I don't see it that way. I believe that we actually have an opportunity to, if CeFi doesn't necessarily want to work with us in that regard, that's fine. We can compete with them too. So when it comes to lobbying, right, it's not only speaking to legislators, but also regulators as well. So we have lots of opportunities to speak with executive branch agencies and regulatory agencies, or again, cabinet level positions. So for example, the United States Treasury and the IRS, they mandate taxation law and how taxes are appropriated and who is taxed for whatever reason, whatever percentage. And then you have, like the SEC, they determine whether a financial instrument or asset is a commodity or security or something else. And, that also ties into taxation.
Exactly. And so it sounds like the scope of the meetings based around the SEC commissioner. Can you kind of give us like just a general scope of some of the folks that you did talk to and how those conversations went? And if you can share anything positive from those conversations that you've taken away, what would those be?
Sure. So we started off with a meeting with SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce. She is a supporter of cryptocurrency and the DeFi space. She's actually put out on GitHub, it's called the Safe Harbor 2.0 framework. It's not a proposal yet because it hasn't been officially proposed, but it is a framework. And essentially what that does is it gives token projects 3 years to, do their work and get off the ground and prove that they're not a security. So this gives them some leeway. They're not immediately slapped on the wrist or pushed to do anything that would make things tight for them. So that Safe Harbor 2.0 framework is, I believe it's essential for DeFi projects, because what I was told was SEC Chairman Gary Gensler, his opinion is that all cryptocurrencies are securities, and I don't necessarily agree with that opinion. So in terms of that framework, for us to get that off of the ground, we need to meet up with other SEC commissioners. There's 5 of them total plus the chair. So we'd have 4 other commissioners to discuss that with and try to get them on board. And then once that happens, they would make a formal proposal. So it would be that framework would turn into an official proposal. And that is when the actual regulation process in that regard would begin. Because after a proposal is made, there is a public comment section. And that is where people like us, community stakeholders, developers, bankers, lobbyists, lawyers, you name it, can come and actually speak to the SEC, voice their concerns. And this is also a time when the SEC and their economic analysts and such are conducting their own research, because they're going to be conducting research before they actually put the regulation out there. So I think we make some great strides in that regard in getting the Safe Harbor 2.0 framework in motion. We also discussed Wyoming has a DAO law, which it's pretty unique in the United States. So Commissioner Peirce said that we should research, potential DAO liabilities that might occur and see how the Wyoming state legislature is working with DAOs in decentralized finance. But also, she also spoke to how we can communicate with other groups and councils. So you have like the President's Working Group and the Financial Stability Oversight Council. Those could help give us clues regarding the potential future steps that the government might take in terms of classifying certain tokens as commodities or securities. And also, we talked a little bit about Coinbase and their lending platform and that whole kerfuffle that's happening. And essentially, any crypto lending platform is likely to be classified as a security. So it's important to communicate to projects that if they do not want to be classified as a security, that they're essentially not going to be able to have a lending platform in that regard. So moving over to the meat of the lobbying, which was meeting with members of Congress. My firm, we reached out there. So for some background, we have the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, which it's a bipartisan caucus within the U.S. House of Representatives, and there are 30 members. They believe in a hands-off approach to cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. And they share my view that cryptocurrency should be allowed to evolve on its own, the same way that the internet did, with as minimal regulation, as minimal governmental interference as possible. So we were able to meet with 12 members or their staffers regarding HR 3684, which is the Invest in America Act. And we discussed the harmful implications that the unclear and ambiguous language within this bill would have on the crypto space, particularly on decentralized finance tokens and projects. The vast majority of the meetings, if not all of them, were largely sympathetic to our cause and our goals. And they also agreed with the hands-off approach, which is great to see that coming from both parties, that this truly is something that it's a bipartisan consensus here. So the Congressional Blockchain Caucus themselves are looking to become a larger platform for government and industry, the crypto industry, to come together. They don't want to make any rash decisions. They want to tap the brakes and spend some time studying this, researching this, understanding how blockchain is going to evolve, how blockchain is going to be working with our lives, because blockchain isn't just crypto and trading and investing. This is going to take up a variety of different spaces, identity management and security, asset tracking, ownership, healthcare record management, voting in elections, having safer and more fair elections, intellectual property rights. There's so many use cases that are possible with cryptocurrency and blockchain ecosystems, and they want to make sure that they do this right, because these members understand that if they do this the wrong way, that not only is it going to affect individuals in terms of their pocketbooks and the overall economy, but it's going to affect the United States. This is going to leave a detrimental impact on the ecosystem here. It's going to hinder and stifle innovation, and it's going to drive that innovation overseas. And if that happens, the United States is going to lose a significant competitive edge to our, I won't say adversaries, but just other countries who are trying to insert themselves into this space. So in terms of...
And just real quick, you also think about kind of what you just said there in the current state of our economy, right? The amount of debt that we're in. I mean, in my personal opinion, it would only make sense for the US government to really embrace what's happening in crypto and DeFi, given that it can be such an economic gain and bring more jobs, create more jobs in America and more opportunities. So for me, in looking at it from a government standpoint, they're doing themselves a large disservice, by some of this language, obviously, but I would say it's much more beneficial, being adopted in the US rather than not. Like you said, being outsourced to other countries, those advantageous opportunities will slip away from the United States. And again, in the state of our current economy, the amount of trillions of dollars of debt that we owe, it's almost the same pitch as it's in cannabis. You need to embrace it and make this happen, because this can ultimately help out so many things other than just our economy in this standpoint, but also, like you said, security, elections, healthcare. I mean, there's so many ways that the blockchain does tie in to real world life and use cases. I'm curious to see their research and what they're finding throughout this process. But I just wanted to highlight, where we're at currently in the United States, and them, kind of pushing it away is an extreme disservice. And I commend also Wyoming, where I have formulated the DeFi Angels out of, for what they're doing and how they have their state set up currently. So anyways, thank you for letting me share that.
Sure. And, it's really relevant what you just said. I'm not sure if you've heard or not, but Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen just spoke today. It was today or yesterday, saying that the U.S. is about to reach its debt limit, and if Congress doesn't pass, a debt ceiling resolution by October 18th, the U.S. government is going to shut down. And that'll actually be the first time in history that we'll actually default on our payments as a country. We've had government shutdowns before, but there is still some money in the tank to keep things running. But this is, we're actually reaching the point of default here. And that's going to be affecting Social Security checks. It's going to be affecting pension payments. It's going to be affecting federal workers. They're not going to be able to work. They're not going to be able to get paid. And even Congress itself will not be working, apart from actually trying to get a deal struck. So, I feel I agree with you. The U.S. government is putting itself in a corner, trying to, they're putting all their faith in fiat currency and the U.S. dollar. And, it seems right now that they're playing games. The Republicans in the Senate blocked the measure that would have, prevented the shutdown. So they've got, about 20 days or so to get their ducks in a row. Otherwise, this is going to have catastrophic implications for the U.S. economy, for the price of products, for interest payments. This is something that, as Janet Yellen said, if this was to happen, it's largely self-inflicted. And the last time this situation happened in 2011 under the Obama administration, when that government shutdown happened, they waited till the very, very last minute. And when they waited to the last minute, and that made paying back the bills even more expensive, just like higher interest rates and things like that. So, it's very, very relevant to what's happening right now.
Absolutely. And it really brings me to another point, is generational wealth, and where, cryptocurrency fits in that module with a broken financial system that's been proven to be broken over and over and over. Given the fact that, we're at the point 20 days out to say, hey, are we going to be able to, pay our debts or not as a country, I think speaks volumes to where we're at currently, but also take in mind where crypto is at currently, being a digital asset. Being broadcasted on national and business news stations daily. It's being used as a hedge strongly against the American dollar. So moving forward, I find it very bullish in ways where we're currently at. I think that the trust has been lost in the financial systems in terms of centralized finance. I think people are starting to really understand the complexity of the blockchain, the way that they can manage their own money, the way that these certain assets work and they're not inflationary. So I think these are all conversations that will come up. Also highlighting that last year, we started noticing a really large movement of Fortune 100 companies in the US getting involved in the cryptocurrency market. So what I would say is right now, I think most of this is mostly scare tactics to enhance positions at more of a corporate level of the people that they rub shoulders with, so that they can more control the industry. Because as of now, I think it's became too big. Personally, again, this is my opinion. I think it's became too big for them to control. The only way that they can do anything is to create these scare tactics, the fear, the uncertainty, the doubt, really roll off that, heavy up their positions, and prepare for the transition that could become with the world of digital assets. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's much more logical to understand, what's happened over the last X amount of years, what's been accomplished so far in cryptocurrency and the blockchain, and all the value that lies itself in the blockchain to scale on, from a corporate standpoint, from an investor standpoint, from making America a better place standpoint. Once these things, if they have the right research, is weighed out, and if we had a seesaw, I think if you place cryptocurrency on one side, big banks, financial institutions on the other side, managing your funds, most people are going to want to go with that cryptocurrency, given what has happened over the years with our financial markets and the way that it's repeating itself. And I'll be candid with you, Josh. I literally was telling people last year, be ready for a recession. Be ready for it. We're overdue for a correction. Generally, it's going to happen between 8 to 12 years through historical data. Right now, we are at that era again. So it totally makes sense that this is happening. COVID has amplified it. I think it's put our country, like you said, in a very big corner to where, you know, it's at the point they need to make a decision on, is this going to be the future of our currency, or at the very least, is it going to be allowed? So taking a step back and asking another question to yourself, what is your thoughts of where cryptocurrency and DeFi lies in the future for us, maybe as investors, devs, you know, coding people, marketing? I mean, everybody in the industry. You don't have a crystal ball. We understand that. But from your high level conversations, what is your personal opinion of where DeFi and cryptocurrency is going as a whole, in terms of the US government and everything in that nature?
Sure. So I'll say the United States government isn't fully against cryptocurrency. You know, they're not stupid. They understand the utility and they see the potential that this type of technology, blockchain, can, you know, can bring about. But the thing is, it's so new. And I mean, hell, when I worked in the Capitol, we were still using like Windows XP, and this was 10 years ago. They were still using Windows XP. They're using Blackberries. Like, the technology was largely outdated and very unsecure. Like, the US government is not known for its speed or efficiency. So you have lots of legislators and you know, policy actors who are older, and they don't understand how computers or the internet work. You know, you might recall Mark Zuckerberg was testifying on Capitol Hill a few years ago, and one of the senators asked, you know, how does Facebook make money? And he's just like, you know, just ads. So it's things like that. They don't know the basic building blocks of how internet technology works. So it's incumbent on us to be the educators, right? You know, we had to educate ourselves on this issue, and that's why we're here. You know, we've taken the time to immerse ourselves in the space and to learn, you know, whether it's investment fundamentals or technical background of blockchain or what have you. There's a whole slew of things that we have taken the time to educate ourselves on. So education is paramount in this regard. We have to enlighten these members of Congress and these other government actors and regulators, and allow them to see things the way that we do, because many of them are still stuck to, you know, fiat currency. And the way I see it is, this is a battle between old money and new money. You know, like I said, you know, and I'll speak to the infrastructure bill in a moment, but that piece of language that's in the bill is, again, it's there to protect the big banks. It's there to protect the old money. So we have to allow them to see things our way, and through that create channels and tunnels that will bring about more friendly language, more friendly regulations, more friendly policies that will benefit us in the long run. So in terms of the infrastructure bill itself, if I could comment on that. So this bill, it's 2,700 pages long. And, you know, within this bill, there's one sentence. It's a paragraph, but it's a run-on sentence. It's a bunch of commas with a period at the end in a 2,700-page document that is going to affect the crypto space. So how this bill works is, it would deliver about $1.2 trillion to the U.S. infrastructure over the next 8 to 10 years. So you have things like $110 billion for roads and bridges, $65 billion for the power grid, $65 billion for broadband, $39 billion for public transit. Now, these are important things that we need, but the issue is, you know, we cannot work on building today's infrastructure at the expense of tomorrow's. And that's what blockchain and crypto are. They are infrastructure, and they will be infrastructure. So out of this $1.2 trillion bill, an estimated $28 billion would be appropriated from cryptocurrency taxes. So if I can read how this language reads, even me as a policy person, when I first read this, I was largely confused because it doesn't make a lick of sense. Whoever wrote this, at the very least, they are ignorant and don't know what they're talking about, or at the most, they're being very, very malicious here. So I'm going to read the section of the infrastructure bill that regards DeFi and what we're working on. So the language reads, it's section 8603, information reporting for brokers and digital assets, furnishing information, section D, return requirement for certain transfers of digital assets not otherwise subject to reporting. So it reads, any broker with respect to any transfer which is not part of a sale or exchange executed by such a broker during a calendar year of a covered security, which is a digital asset from an account maintained by such broker to an account which is not maintained by or an address not associated with a person that such broker knows or has reason to know is also a broker, shall make a return for such calendar year in such form as determined by the secretary, showing the information otherwise required to be furnished with respect to transfers subject to subsection A. Now, if you're someone who doesn't know policy, you don't know what the hell that means. It's a bunch of gobbledygook. If you're someone like me who understands policy, it still doesn't make a lick of sense. And all of that is one sentence. That's a run-on sentence with a bunch of commas. There's only one period in that whole thing. So the reason this is a problem is the language defining what a broker is too broad. This could require brokers to be, to require them to submit KYC information. They could encompass other entities like cryptocurrency miners, proof of stake validators, developers, decentralized exchanges, who are ultimately unable to comply with these reporting requirements because they're DeFi. They're not subject or liable to any government, to any centralized organization, to any authority. You can't enforce it. It could encompass other entities who don't act as brokers, nor do they provide or hold or require any customer information to do so, which would be largely detrimental to their operations, particularly stateside. And then again, as we mentioned earlier, it would stifle developments and innovations here in the US, and that's going to send innovation and achievement to competitors abroad, but it's going to send money abroad. It's going to send money out of the US borders too. When you look at the US banking system as it is now, there's 7 million Americans who are unbanked, meaning that they're keeping their life savings in their piggy banks and under their mattresses. And then you have another 20 million people who are underbanked, meaning that they do not have the access to traditional banking services that wealthier people would. So that could be anything from home loans, or people just having a checking account, no savings account, or people not having access to lines of credit for a business or for automobile purchases. Or even a Roth IRA, a 401k, a pension plan. There are lots of folks who are underbanked and don't have access to those services. And that's, I personally believe that DeFi can certainly bridge the gap in bringing in those unbanked and underbanked people into the fold and giving them an opportunity to be more financially sustainable and financially independent as well.
I couldn't agree more, with that. And it just, it just wows me. It's always hypocrisy with the government and any, emerging or disruptive industry that I've been in. And with this, the hypocrisy is so blatantly visible that it's disgusting. They want insights to people's money. They want to be able to track, every movement of every little thing in everybody's life. Well, blockchain actually allows that. And the fact that they cannot control it, I think, drives them insane, to the point where they want to bring down regulations and be malicious. But if they are listening somehow to this, I think be receptive. Know that there are good people in this space that are willing to pave a new wave, for lack of better terms. But also, really think about the current climate of our country, and what this can do in terms of generational wealth, for so many people, and opportunities with so many companies. It's truly an amazing thing. And if the USA, happens to drag their feet, let other countries, beat them to this, it's going to be very detrimental. And I think that when you look at fiat, you look at the way it's backed, you look at the way that we print money, it's not hard to see a broken system. Also, given with cash, it's untraceable, especially given the amount that's printed. So, having the optics inside of DeFi, I think is truly amazing, there. So, coming to the table down the road, I want to see more of what the US government's research, like who's doing that research, right? Because that's important. Who is the person that is spoon feeding, these folks on Capitol Hill with what they think that they need to hear, right? Because we need the true message out there. So to my point and what I'm getting at, if we could take away, anybody listening to this, if you're a DeFi angel, you're a member in the Hodge community, a general crypto investor, or somebody that understands that, cryptocurrency can be a way for generational wealth for our kids, and their kids, right? That's something that we need to be conversating about. So moving forward, Josh, in your words, if we were to take away anything from this tonight, what should it be? And then how can we act on that to do more and fight this fight to get our message across?
Sure. So what I'll highlight on right here is, the reason I went last week was because Congress, Speaker Pelosi had said that she wanted to vote on this yesterday, September 27th. So I wanted to make sure that we got over there to have our say before that. This bill, when last week, it was highly likely that the bill was going to pass. And like I said, this bill is 2,700 pages long, and what we're focusing on is one sentence. It's a paragraph out of a 2,700 page document. It passed the Senate. The Senate attempted to take out that language, but it didn't work. And when it got over to the House, they said that they were not going to add any amendments. They were going to not make any changes, and that's crypto or non-crypto related. They weren't going to make any changes at all. They're just going to try to pass it through. There have been some interesting developments over the past 72 hours. There is so like I said, this bill is $1.2 trillion. The initial bill that came up was around $3 trillion, and you had the moderate Democrats say that was too much, so they brought it down to 1.2. Now the moderates are saying that 1.2 trillion is too much, and so that's creating some contention between the moderate Democrats and the more progressive Democrats. The progressives are saying, no way, no how, we're not budging on this anymore. We already dropped it down a significant chunk. We're not going to remove any more money from this. So right now, as it stands, there are about 60 progressive Democrats from the Congressional Progressive Caucus who are not going to vote for this bill. The Democrats, they are the majority. They don't have 60 votes to lose. And Speaker Pelosi said that she would not bring a bill to the floor that does not have the votes. That is why it was not voted on yesterday. And they're working on trying to flip, enough progressives to vote yes for this. But right now, it's looking like this measure might actually fail, that the infrastructure bill might actually not go through, which, it is bad because we do need that infrastructure and we do need to work on our roads and bridges and internet and help people in rural areas. But in terms of what our interests are here for crypto, that buys us some more time, right? So the main objectives of this lobbying trip were to hopefully, completely eliminate the amendment language from the infrastructure bill in regards to the crypto taxation. That's likely not going to happen at this juncture. So if the passage of the infrastructure bill is to happen, we need to position ourselves in a manner that allows us to draft our own language for regulations and to create our own policies for submission, review, and approval to the U.S. government, both within the legislative branch, which is Congress, and the executive branch, which includes cabinet-level agencies like the Treasury Department and the IRS, and independent regulatory agencies like the SEC. So like I mentioned before, any policy formulation should not be done hastily. It has, there has to be time, there has to be research. You have to be fully knowledgeable of how, not just how the policy is going to work, but how it's going to be implemented and what the after effects are of that policy. Whenever we start enforcing a policy, who is it going to affect and how? And we already know the how in terms of this part. So we want to try to backtrack that. So when it comes to what we do in next steps, right? We have a few different options in my professional opinion. And that is that the battle isn't necessarily lost if this thing passes. But with these developments ongoing, we should act and anticipate as if this passage is going to go through. Now, the IRS and the Treasury Department have both put out statements saying that if this does pass, they're not going to enforce it right away. And that's what some folks don't understand about executive action. So, for example, Biden is president right now, so it's his administration, it's his IRS, his Treasury Department, his SEC. If you think back to President Obama, his Justice Department, they stopped prosecuting certain marijuana crimes, which even though they're still illegal under federal law, the president's administration gave the cabinet agency the order not to enforce these laws. So in this regard, Biden's IRS and Biden's Treasury Department have said that they're not going to enforce this right away, that they want to conduct their own research, right? So Taylor, you were speaking earlier to how you'd like to see who is spoon feeding information and data and research to the government. So you do have, of course, your in-house government folks who, government employees who are research analysts and data specialists, and they do that quantitative work. But we are stakeholders as well. So what I propose is, actually bringing in our own folks into the mix in terms of our own researchers, our own developers. So for example, we could schedule lobbying appointments with appropriate members of the IRS and the Treasury Department, because both of these bodies regulate and mandate taxation. So that would actually be, if this bill passes and they do want to talk about enforcing it, this would be the next best step in preventing DeFi from being unfairly taxed. And this is important just because they are taking a step back and they want to perform their own research. So this gives us an opportunity to not only provide our own feedback and our input, but we can also introduce our own research and our own data for the government's review. And what I would like to do is, extend an olive branch to the government and volunteer some of the people on our side to work tag team with the government. So while the government is doing their own research, some of our folks are with them working side by side, communicating, collaborating, tag teaming to ensure that we can have a more friendly environment for DeFi. The next step that I would say is, which they could be done in tandem with this process, to draft legislation, which would clearly define what a broker is, what a validator is, what a wallet is, what a developer is, et cetera, and introduce these to the members of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus that we spoke to, plus other members that I'm speaking to next week remotely that we didn't have a chance to meet with, plus other non-caucus legislators, to hope that they would seek sponsorship on this and actually be able to bring it up onto the floor of the House. So one of the things that I've thought about is, we're DeFi, we're trying to save DeFi. And when you're trying to save someone that's dying, you use a defibrillator. So I've thought of the Defibrillator Act, which stands for Decentralized Finance, Building Revolutionary Innovations and Legislating Against Taxes or Regulations Act. That's what defibrillator stands for. So we could use our own language and try and propose that for sponsorship within the US House. The other option that we have is exploring the concept and the legality of forming a cryptocurrency/DeFi super PAC, which is a political action committee. And that can be used to generate funds, support, visibility for the issues that are facing our community, as well as potentially contributing to pro-crypto, pro-DeFi candidates in local, state, and federal electoral races. And lastly, this is a community effort. I know my name says Hoj Lobbyist, but, I'm a DeFi lobbyist. I'm a crypto lobbyist. We're working with the DeFi Angels. This is the DeFi Angels project. It's up to us to bring in other tokens, other projects, other groups and organizations into the fold to work with us. We have to have other tokens and other coins on this, because the more bodies that you have in this regard, that's going to create more visibility, that's going to have more influence. And eventually what I would like to do is host an in-person lobbying day, perhaps sometime next year when, hopefully COVID will die down and the conditions for social interaction will be a little bit more favorable. But hell, can you imagine having 50, 100, 200 people marching in Washington through the steps of Capitol Hill, meeting with legislators, lobbying? We could have a conference where we all meet at a convention center at a hotel, have breakfast. We do a legislative training. We'll teach you the ins and outs of government and Congress and how it works. We'll teach you how to lobby a member of Congress. We'll teach you how to speak and how to interact with them. And then for the next day, 2, 3, 4 days, however long it takes, we hit the halls of Congress and we knock on the doors and we set appointments and we speak with legislators and we tell them how we feel. That's what lobbying is. That's what influence is. So we have a great opportunity to grow here.
Very well said, and couldn't agree more. And moving forward, I think that you've highlighted some very prudent points. Data analytics, I think, will be prudent to show and highlight the beneficial markers of the blockchain and how it ties into real world uses and our economy, and how the government can be able to work with us. That elegant language that we can use to, attract the right people on that side to have these more high level conversations instead of, the old money versus new money is what essentially, like you're saying, is happening. I think that, from a larger, point of view, the older money needs to focus is on, well, the new money is our kids, our grandchildren, their kids and their grandchildren. So if we're making the world a better place by using more innovative technology, the government needs to realize that, and we shouldn't have generation this, that, and the other. We're all Americans. We're all in it for the same goal. We want the success for our nation. We want the success for ourselves and our families. So when you have an opportunity, like an industry like this, multiple billions, if not trillions of dollars, you want a piece of that action as a country. That's a lot of revenue. So that would be, my message to anybody in a higher place in government that's listening there. Obviously, you're probably having those conversations, but working with the people that are the pioneers of this sector, that are formulating the right paths, building them, and creating, a place that's safe within a wild, wild west industry. We're essentially teeing this up and giving it to them on a silver platter. So, I would love to see the mutual work between us, yourself, folks on the Hill, to bring this to fruition. I've made notes, I think, to highlight everything, to get it brought up on the floor, get the outside report. I love the Defib Act. That's our own language, like you're saying. So whatever that we need to do to get behind that, I know that you and I are going to move to, offline conversations, but this is something that I definitely think needs to happen, along with the super PAC, being able to generate funds for issues in the sector and contribute that back through lobbying efforts to the right people to be put in these positions, which are going to be the decision makers on these behalfs, is also very prudent. That's how the political game works. That's how we did it in cannabis. And you look back at the cannabis industry, there was a lot of similar language. I can tell you personally, we overcame everything. It's a more stigmatized industry than crypto is. So the fact that we were able to do similar steps that we're already paving earlier than we did in cannabis within DeFi now, I think puts us in a better position for success, with overall, again, what I'll call prohibition of decentralized finance and cryptocurrency. And then in terms of bringing in, other projects, larger tokens, larger projects, to work alongside us, other investment groups, our larger partners. These are conversations that they want to be at the table of. So I would be delighted to start, reaching out with my core team, along with anybody else who is on this call or listening into this recording. We are open to have those conversations. I think it's time that, DeFi unites, crypto unites. We go out, we address. We've already laid the foundation here. We've already dipped our toe in the water. Now it's time to go knee deep. We start swimming. It's time to let them know and let the world know what the blockchain can do for the positivity of the world and the overall infrastructure that it can provide to a nation that is basically crippled in debt and a very faltering economy. It can only use what cryptocurrency and decentralized finance is bringing to the table. So I hope that message is heard. And then, lastly, before I open this up, Josh, for you to close out and answer any questions for our members, but I always like to use this reference, and I've seen it come up in our chat. I've mentioned it, that transitions of wealth. If you look back, every sector, right? Real estate, the crash there, people came out really big on top that jumped in back in 08. You look at cannabis, 11, 12, highly illegal is what we'll put it, still federally illegal, which changes are coming, but we were able to do it state by state, which crypto can honestly do as well, I think, in the same kind of sense. They can go state by state. But looking at what we did there, and, my company ended up merging with a Fortune 100 company, everything was above board. It turned out to be okay. When we thought it was cowboys and Indians, we still evolved and we worked with the right people. The same thing that we're doing now in this call with Josh and lobbyists and everything, it all leads to that bigger fight and that bigger battle down the road. But I want to highlight this again. Look back at the dot-com boom, and how that all evolved. So look at the banking system with credit cards and how that rolled out and how much money that the banks make off just plastic and the charges that come around that. I encourage you to go do your research on how the banking system works and how much money that they profit on managing your money and having you use plastic as credit cards and all the inner taxes that are in between those things that really come out of your total dollar amount on top of the inflation. I also encourage anybody on this call that wants to create generational wealth to take a look at timing and positioning of markets in terms of federal regulation and exception and adoption. That's when generational wealth happens, okay? That's when it happens. When you're able to take advantage of the timing and the positioning of these markets. For example, Joseph Kennedy, I think, created 98% of his wealth through a prohibition of alcohol, which is an industry that still today is being regulated, okay? It started off where county by county, the same way as cannabis. Take these things in mind. That industry's been being regulated now over 70 years. It's still being regulated, but think about the money that's been accrued from those early ages and look at where we're at in crypto today, right now. Faltering economy, okay? A huge infrastructure that can really change the complexity of the whole nation for the better, for big business, for your average mom and pop shop, for the better of sending money around the world and accessibility to funds at anybody's fingertips in a matter of time, not having to wait certain long periods of time in countries that you may be in to get these funds. Think about that positioning in this market and the timing that we're at today, having these conversations. And I just want you to mark that in your head and think of where that can lead down the road and what this can become. And on that right there, I'm going to stop with my questions, Josh. And I want to really let that sink in with folks listening on this call that understand emerging markets and really how this can play out if you position yourself right. So in closing, Josh, for you, before we open up, this platform for all of our core team and our deal flow committee and really anybody on the call that does have questions regarding, anything that we've covered tonight. In closing, first for you, is there anything that you would like to say before we open this up for the Q&A time?
Sure. I couldn't have said it better myself. You hit it right on the head. And when we were in DC, we put out some videos, made one for DeFi Angels and one for Hoj. And those videos had a lot of traction online. They got over 200, 300 likes and a whole bunch of retweets. This truly is a community-based effort. And I see this a lot as a cross promotion. All of our respective partners that come in and join us, we're representing our projects and we're also representing each other. So with that increased visibility and traction on the internet, particularly when we bring in more tokens and coins and groups onto this project, that's going to take us a really, really long way. So to wrap up, as we all know, the crypto and DeFi spaces are still in their pioneering infancies, and we have lots of room to grow. And despite these challenges and obstacles that are standing in our way, we stand at a strategic advantage. And that's because we are among the first in the DeFi space to take the fight for DeFi to Capitol Hill. No other DeFi project can say that. And while many other centralized bodies, like I mentioned before, Coinbase, Robinhood, they have their lobbyists, they have their lawyers, they have their special interests representing them in these regards. DeFi still needs the political and the intellectual might to assist us, in our efforts for security, for innovation, for expansion of access to a point where all of these projects and tokens and their use cases are commonplace and widely accepted. And as we're still in this early adopter phase of this technology, the time is right now to create our own rules, to create our own language, And this work that we do is going to pave the way for decades to come. It's going to affect our children, our grandchildren, and people that we don't even know are going to exist. And if we continue this focus on political advocacy and concentrated media focus, we can generate so much more support and visibility. And that's going to lead to bringing on even more projects to assist with our goals. And the more projects, the more bodies, the more people we have in this endeavor, that is going to make the groundwork for us so much easier. So the way I see it, this lobbying trip served as a pilot program for this type of effort. And, as I said at the very beginning, it was a largely successful one. Now that we have a sense of how the political landscape works and how it's looking like, we can work on laying that groundwork for future lobbying and advocacy days, both in person and remotely. And we can continue building credibility, not just for our respective brands, but for our respective spaces and our political and economic interests as well. This is just the beginning. This is absolutely historic, and we are off to an incredible start. And this, in my opinion, looks very promising to our goals, our aims, and our efforts. And again, I'd like to thank all of you for this opportunity. I truly am blessed and honored to be part of this fight. And I'm so happy that you've brought me on along for this effort and that you took the time out of your busy evenings to hear what I had to say. So from the bottom of my heart, truly, I do thank you. And with that, I'll open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Josh, and you're welcome here anytime with us, as we'll be obviously in communications moving forward and getting behind anything that we can to really help push the space in the right direction. So thank you for coming on, and for all of us listening tonight, I know it's been a pleasure. I certainly can't wait to share this recording with the world, as all DeFi, cryptocurrency investors, projects, anybody out there, this is something that you need to listen to. This is something that you need to take serious. And this is something that we act on now. So with that being said, does anybody on our team want to ask any questions while we have Josh here?
Hey Josh, thank you again so much for doing this. Sorry, the chat's been like blowing up the whole time that you're talking. You got everyone pumped, you got everyone hyped up. You just do such a great job explaining it. And every time you talk about it and it starts this conversation and we start talking about it, I mean, it's just so inspirational. And there's so many things that I could point out. Taylor, you did a really great job, like asking questions throughout the way and just bringing up really valid points. And I just want to just reiterate really, really big is that the point when you were talking about, the more bodies and the more presence that we have, on the internet, on social media is just wicked important. And it builds the credibility of, as again, to echo what you said, not just the initiative, but the DeFi space and each, project. And I hope that everyone on this call can share this with their network and their circle of people, because this isn't, it doesn't matter, what token, goes 100 times if, DeFi bill is written to cripple it. Like, we need to stand together, and we're much more louder and, more powerful when we stand together. And this is, not just, the Angels fight. This is not just Hoja's fight. This is the DeFi in itself. So I hope that we can continue having these AMAs and we can continue just spreading this awareness of what this is and why it's so important, and why it's really amazing that we're in this, we are living in this time, in this historical time of, DeFi being built, or, being tweaked, or being, coming out. I mean, this really will be something that is going to change the whole entire, the economic shift, the power shift, all of it. And it's really incredible that we're a part, that we're living in this time, and that we're in this sector, and that we can do something about it. So yeah, I think it would be great if we just keep spreading this word and we keep having these conversations, because it's really important. So thanks again, Josh. You did a great job, and I'm pumped. I'm hyped about this. I'm all over the chats, on every single chat that I'm in.
My pleasure, Jess. Thank you for having me. Very well said. I see a.
I was saying, I'm sorry, I have a question. Josh, I was wondering, is the consensus that it's imminent that we are going to end up having regulations, and is the end goal to be the ones to shape it, or to minimize it? What exactly, what does it look like? Because I get where the fight is right now, but ultimately, what does that look like?
Sure. So, you know how the adage goes, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So, the way I operate is I don't like to delude myself or give myself false hope. So, I act on the defensive in that I think it's safe for us. As far as the consensus goes, I'm not quite sure. This is still up in the air. And I don't think anybody really knows how this is going to play out. But from the way I see it, we should expect that there will be regulations. And if that's the case, we need to work on making these regulations friendly and favorable to us. And like, for example, the infrastructure bill. If it comes to it, and I think it will, we're going to need a sacrificial lamb here. And I think that means we're going to have to throw CeFi under the bus to protect our interests. So if government does want to regulate, if they do want to tax, and they do want to do all the things that they're saying they want to do in this bill, we want to start directing their attention towards CeFi. Hell, they have all the money, they have all this influence, so surely they can pay for it and pick up the tab. So, again, the past 72 hours have been very fluid, as is federal politics. So, again, this bill might not pass. If you asked me last week, I'd say it's very likely going to pass. If you ask me today, it's up in the air. Like 60 votes is a lot, and the Democrats don't have that leeway. They don't have that wiggle room. So if they can't pass this, that means that it's not codified. And we can talk about the bad part of that, and that we're not going to get the infrastructure we need. But again, we're focusing on our interests here with crypto and DeFi. That buys us a significant amount of time, because if they can't pass this, a bill like this, it's going to be much harder for them to try to slip it in some other route. And if they do, it's going to have to go through both chambers again, the Senate and the House. So we can reach out to those members of the Senate whenever it gets there, the members of the Senate that were actively trying to block the crypto amendment from being in the bill, as well as the other members of the U.S. House Congressional Blockchain Caucus, and try to create a joint coalition between both chambers. And if we can create a coalition like that, that's bipartisan and bicameral, and that it's the House and the Senate, I think that gives us a large strategic advantage. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So I'll ask a question. Hey, Josh, quick question for you. When your discussions on the Hill, what were discussions about just making legislation more efficient? Like, did they bring up the role of potentially SROs or other types of committees that could help just gather knowledge about, the granularity of the industry itself?
We didn't specifically speak about SROs, but we did talk about the CRS, which is the Congressional Research Service. That is the in-house body that Congress uses. So, for example, members of Congress don't read bills. By the way, if you didn't know that, they don't read bills at all. So they have legislative staff. They're the ones that do the reading, and then they basically get the Cliff's notes of what it is. So what the CRS does, they assist the legislative staff. They get like the nitty gritty data. So say you have a spending bill, right? And the CRS, those are the folks that are going to say, okay, so if we give $100,000 to this school district, this is how many students it's going to affect. This is how many books it's going to buy. This is how the graduation rate might be affected. This is how the dropout rate might be affected, things like that. So the Congressional Research Service is an arm that we would be able to contact and use potentially, because they're the ones that create that research and pass it on to the legislative staff, who then in effect pass that over to legislators. So if we can work with the CRS in that regard, I think that would be helpful in our research efforts. But you said SROs, right? I could actually look more into that and get back to you. If you want to send me a message on here,
Yeah,
so
sure.
I have a way to contact you, I'd be more than happy to get back to you on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Hey, Josh, sorry, I have another question. And I know you touched on, some things earlier, but let's say in the chat we were talking about a petition or something like that. Now, aside from getting on social media and on the website, on the internet, is there anything else that we all can do to kind of spread that aware, or what can we do at home? Is there a congressperson that we should reach out to? I mean, anything that we can do would help.
Sure. So it's a bit tricky, and I'll explain why. So, they say Congress represents all of us, but each member of Congress, each representative, they're only beholden to their constituents. So it can be a bit tricky reaching out to members who aren't representing you. I'm going to post the link here. I'm going to post it in the chat. This is the link to the Congressional Blockchain Caucus with all of the members. Some of the contact pages that they had were pretty straightforward, and they allowed me to reach out to them. But others have a mechanism on there where you have to put in your zip code, and if your zip code doesn't fall within that district, they won't allow you to contact them. And that's mostly to prevent, think of like a DDoS attack, right? You just keep spamming a website. There have been, occasions where lobbyists or even just constituents will just spam and flood the phone lines and the emails, and it's hard to differentiate who's a constituent and who isn't. So they put that mechanism in place. However, it's very, very easy to find it's easy to find the emails for members. It's typically like their first name dot last name at mail.house.gov, or you can do a simple Google search as to who their legislative staff is. So in terms of what you can do at home, and this is something that I can do for the DeFi Angels, on my firm's website, I'll create a page there that has a guide on how to reach out more efficiently to members of Congress. But in terms of getting started, you can reach out to these members. Just send them an email. I wouldn't contact them through their page because of that mechanism. If you could just send a regular email to them or a legislative correspondent, legislative assistant, I think that would be much more useful, because then they'll actually have your email and they're much more likely to respond to you.
No,
Thank you.
thank you.
Sure. I see a question up here from Hogeman. I lost it. Let me go back to it here. I wanted to make sure I get to it because it was at the top. One moment here. Okay, so do the DeFi Angels think no regulation is the path forward? Just for me personally speaking, I'm not speaking for the group. I don't think that no regulation is necessarily the path forward, just because, I mean, anything without regulation, that means that anything can happen. So if we're going to have, there has to be some sort of framework, right? Some sort of structure that we can piggyback off of. So I think the initial steps right now are, like I said, drafting our own language, drafting our own, or introducing our own concepts and definitions that would be friendly and receptive to what it is that we're looking for. So again, if we're talking about brokers or exchanges, we want those to, we're going to define what a DeFi broker, a DeFi exchange is in comparison and contrast to a centralized exchange, a centralized broker, what have you. So we want to make sure that we are using regulation to our advantage. Because when you look at policy, what I've learned in policy school is they give you the toolkit, but it's up to you to decide how to use the tools. So, you could, a pencil, you could use a pencil to write a paper, or you could use a pencil to stab someone in the arm. If you have a broken vase, you could use glue to fix it, or you could use a hammer to smash it. We have the tools in the toolbox. It's up to us to decide how those tools are used. So in that regard, you bring up great points, in terms of, natural monopolies, the banking systems being unstable, all these other things that, mistakes of the past. We absolutely do want to prevent the mistakes of the past. And I think that can be done by, again, bringing in our own language and it's not just introducing our own language, it's also producing a rationale, explaining why this is the better way compared to whatever else might be proposed. So I do hope that answers your question. And again, that's just my personal opinion. It's I don't speak for the group here.
Yeah, and I was actually
another comment or another. Thanks for answering. In the same context, suppose for argument the Fed tries to make changes and their controls are ineffective. Who in your world is looking at the whole picture? It's in the chat if you want to read it.
Yes, I see it here. Let me consider it for a moment. When you say who in your world, do you mean in terms of like my team or the people I'm working with or government agencies? Because the Fed is, largely independent. They're okay. Government, Congress staffers. Yeah. So in terms of what the Fed does, you could, for example, have like the Congressional Finance Committee or the Banking Committee work on different concerns that way. So like when bills or regulations or policies are piped through Congress, they don't just go to the floor. They start out with a caucus, and then they move on to a committee process, subcommittees and then committees. Subcommittees are much more specific, and then committees themselves are more broader. And then, of course, the House floor itself is the broadest. So you could use those opportunities. Actually, like going back to the civil rights work that I used to do a few years ago, we could schedule meetings with those committees. And whenever they have hearings, we could actually bring our own people into the fold to give testimony, to provide testimony on the record. as to why what the Fed is doing isn't working, and try to create, market controls or mechanisms that would try to correct whatever it is that's not working. Because again, the Fed is largely independent, so we would have to use other channels in that regard to try to have some influence. I hope that answers your question. No problem. Don't apologize. I had to start out somewhere too. It's okay. We're all in this together, and I'm here to educate everyone. And thank you for all the work that you do, Hoj man. I'm a big fan.
Thank you for the question as well, Hoj man. That was a good question. I was meaning to ask for you, but I'm glad that we did get it answered. So not to take up everybody's night, I mean, I'm kind of already looking at what we can do, how we can act fastly and get behind this for the better. So, with that being said, my questions are answered. Josh, I think you've done an outstanding job highlighting to the masses here the current state that we're in and the fight that we need to have. And the DeFi Angels will always be right there with you at the forefront of that, and looking out for the betterment of the entire sector in crypto and DeFi in general. But with that being said, does anybody else here on the call tonight maybe have any last questions before we part ways with our friend Josh? Okay, very good.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Taylor and Jess and the rest of the DeFi Angels and everyone else. I'm sorry, this car and everyone else who took the time out of what I'm sure your busy schedule. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity. It has been a privilege and an honor, and I'm very much looking forward to fighting the good fight and continuing this effort with all of you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you for coming on. We'll love to host you again and move into further talks on some of the things that we've discussed. I'm looking forward to that. But at this time, I feel like this is a great AMA. We'll be sure to have this uploaded to YouTube and share with yourself and our respective communities around the decentralized finance sector. We'd also encourage these projects and groups to share this AMA and this message to get behind our cause. We are all in this together, so I hope that we can combine forces and be heard. So thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. Thank you, Josh, for coming in and laying out really the blueprint and the overall mission statement that we have started in this forefront of the pioneering side. Again, much gratitude for what you do. We are so excited to keep working with you in the future. So at this time, Kate, if you want to go ahead and kill the recording, that's fine with me. And thank